They thought they were so clever, so untouchable, masters of their own universe, architects of empires built on power, money, and whispers in dark corners. Every move calculated, every ally secured with promises and threats. But arrogance has a way of breeding blindness, and when the blind lead the blind, it always ends the same way. They dug their own graves with diamond-studded shovels, grinning like kings as they pushed their enemies into the abyss. But here's the irony. The deeper they dug for others, the deeper they buried themselves. One wrong move, one overlooked detail, and that carefully constructed house of cards starts to sway, starts to fall. Pride is a poison, a silent killer that worms its way into the mind and whispers sweet, deadly lies. It tells the powerful that they are invincible, that their mistakes will always be forgiven, forgotten. It tells them they are the exception, above consequences, untouchable. But pride's greatest trick is convincing the foolish that danger will pass them by. They believe in their own infallibility until it's too late, until the first domino falls, and all that remains is a symphony of ruin. Oh, how they scramble, how they fight to hold on to the fragments of what once made them kings. But by then, the end is already written, inked in blood and betrayal. The downfall is always of their own making. They built their castles with bricks of arrogance, their towers with glass walls, never considering that stones could shatter everything. The cracks were there all along, small at first, easy to ignore. Greed makes a man deaf to warning signs. The world begged them to pay attention, to show humility, to see the danger coming. But the arrogant are blind by choice, and so they marched forward, smug and unafraid. Their plans were flawless, their enemies crushed beneath the weight of their ambition, until the ground itself gave way beneath them. Because power makes one reckless, and the higher you climb, the longer the fall. It's almost funny, watching how they scramble when the walls come crashing down. Those who once sat on thrones, who made decisions that changed the course of cities, now running, now afraid, now desperate. Their allies scatter like rats from a sinking ship, the sycophants vanishing into shadows, the false friends who praised under their faces, now laughing at their backs. The same people who toasted to their victories are now vultures, circling, waiting to pick the bones of what's left. And that's the price of building a kingdom on quicksand, on lies and cruelty. When the end comes, it comes with a vengeance, and it doesn't care about past glories. What a spectacle, the unraveling of the mighty. They built a world that revolved around their desires, a universe where they made the rules, believing that no one could touch them. But in their hubris, they created the very monsters that would come back to haunt them. Enemies made in backroom deals, in betrayals and broken promises. People can only be stepped on for so long before they rise, before they sharpen their knives. The mighty never consider that the oppressed remember every slight, every injury. The seeds of downfall are planted early, watered by arrogance, and when they bloom red and wild. Desperation is an ugly thing. The fall turns proud men into beggars, once commanding respect, now pleading for it. Their power was never theirs. It was borrowed, a fleeting illusion, granted by fear. And when the world stops fearing, when the illusion shatters, all that's left is a man who believed his own lies. Watching the powerful become powerless is a lesson the world never grows tired of teaching. It's always the same story. Too much greed, too little foresight, and a refusal to accept the limits of mortality. Because empires built on selfishness are always destined to crumble, no matter how tall the walls or how thick the gates. Even as everything falls apart, they never truly understand. They blame bad luck, the treachery of others, fate itself. Accountability, that's for the small, for the weak. The mighty convince themselves that their downfall is some cosmic injustice, that their greatness was robbed from them. It's easier than admitting the truth, that their own hands lit the match, that their choices built the bonfire that now consumes them. And that's the final tragedy. Even in ruin, they refuse to learn. Arrogance clings, whispers its final lie, and they die as they lived, wrapped in delusion, choking on the ashes of their own creation. The fall is inevitable, yet always spectacular. Watching the unraveling is like watching a grand play where the actors refuse to see the script unfolding. Denial is their final act, their swan song, a desperate plea to a world that has already moved on. No one mourns the fall of the tyrant. No one weeps for the fall of the greedy. The world cheers. The world drinks to their demise, because it is a cautionary tale that never loses its appeal. Pride, the oldest poison, the most seductive sin. It whispers promises of power, invincibility, and immortality. Once, it took angels and turned them into devils, corrupted beings who thought themselves untouchable, godlike, above the laws of the universe. It makes no exceptions, takes no prisoners. Pride rots the soul from the inside out, draping arrogance over every virtue until nothing pure remains. It deceives, makes fools believe they can rise above even the highest thrones. But every ascent born of pride carries the seed of a fall. And the higher you climb on borrowed wings, the more devastating the descent when the feathers are ripped away. Pride doesn't care who you are. It only cares about bringing you low. Humility, on the other hand, is a quiet, understated power. It makes no promises, demands no spotlight. Yet, it is the force that keeps men steady, that anchors them to the ground, even as they rise. It is humility that allows mortals to approach something divine, that preserves the soul from the rot of arrogance. Where pride devours and divides, humility nurtures and unites. It takes strength to be humble, to recognize that power is fleeting, that no one is immune to the cruelties of fate. Humility doesn't keep you from greatness. It keeps you from self-destruction, from the pit that pride digs under your feet while you're busy admiring your reflection. The world reveres strength, but it forgets that humility is the ultimate strength. The humble are untouchable in ways the proud can never understand. Pride builds a fortress around the ego, but humility fortifies the soul. Those who carry humility are not slaves to praise or prisoners of their own image. They do not need the validation of others, do not crave the roar of applause. And that terrifies the proud, who measure their worth in how high they can stand above others. Humility strips away illusion, leaves the heart bare and unbreakable. It is a quiet rebellion against the very thing that corrupts kings and condemns angels. People fear humility because it demands self-awareness, demands that you kneel before your own limitations. Pride feeds the fantasy of perfection, of flawlessness. It builds an empire of mirrors, where everything is designed to reflect back the most flattering image. But mirrors shatter, and when they do, pride leaves nothing but shards and blood. Humility doesn't shatter. It's unbreakable, rooted in the acceptance that no one is above falling. It is humility that lets a person rise with grace and fall with dignity. The proud, when faced with failure, thrash, deny, rage. The humble learn, adapt, grow. They endure. The proud are easy to destroy because they're brittle. Their sense of worth hangs on a thread, a precarious illusion, easily shattered. The slightest criticism feels like a dagger, every defeat a public execution. Pride makes one fragile, desperate to maintain appearances, terrified of exposure. Humility, however, makes one resilient. The humble are comfortable in their imperfections, unafraid of the truth because they've made peace with it. They don't need to pretend, to build walls of lies to protect themselves. The proud spend their lives running from weakness, but the humble turn weakness into wisdom. It's the difference between a paper crown and a soul forged in fire. Pride blinds. It convinces the mighty that the laws of nature do not apply to them, that their empires will never fall, that their reigns will be eternal. It intoxicates, numbing the senses, dulling the instincts that would warn of danger. It transforms allies into enemies, loyalty into betrayal. It whispers sweet nothings, making the powerful deaf to the cries of reality. And when the fall comes, as it always does, pride leaves them stunned, gasping, unprepared. Humility, on the other hand, keeps one awake, alert, aware of the precariousness of existence. The humble see the shadows even on the sunniest days, and they are ready when the storm comes. The proud think humility is weakness, a flaw to be eradicated. They scoff at those who bow their heads, who tread carefully, who admit their mistakes. But humility is not submission. It's a weapon, a shield. It keeps you strong where it matters, flexible where it counts. The humble are survivors, adaptable and wise. The proud, they are fodder for fate, destined to be remembered only for how spectacularly they failed. And it's a cosmic joke, really, how pride always sets up its own downfall, how it leads the mighty right into the jaws of their doom, while the humble watch, learn, and endure. Pride cannot accept limitation, and that's its fatal flaw. It drives one to overreach, to break rather than bend, to burn bridges rather than admit weakness. The humble build, even in defeat. They repair, mend, heal. Pride demands all or nothing, while humility finds value in every small victory. The proud are masters of their own ruin, architects of self-inflicted disaster. Evil is a paradox, a fire that consumes itself even as it spreads. It's seductive, promising power, glory, and victory to those who embrace it. And for a time, it delivers. Empires rise on the backs of the corrupt. Fortunes are made in the shadows, and rulers declare themselves untouchable. Evil delights in its conquests, relishes the taste of victory, convinced that it has outsmarted the world. But buried deep within every dark scheme, every act of wickedness, lies the seed of self-destruction. It cannot sustain itself. By its very nature, evil is a house built on rotten foundations, destined to collapse under the weight of its own decay. Negativity is the engine that drives evil, but it is also the flaw that destroys it. Darkness cannot breed strength. It only breeds more darkness, more fragility, more rot. The grandest plans, the most intricate plots, no matter how foolproof they seem, carry with them an expiration date. For evil requires lies, betrayal, and destruction to thrive, and these forces do not build, they dismantle. The foundations that support evil's triumph will eventually give way, because destruction, by definition, cannot sustain. The architects of wickedness are blind to this flaw, drunk on their own power, unaware that every step they take forward leads them closer to a chasm of their own making. Evil may glitter, may shine with the allure of untold power, but it's always a facade. Scratch the surface, and underneath lies chaos, corruption, and a ticking clock counting down to ruin. The more elaborate the plan, the more assured the fall. Because evil demands absolute control, and absolute control is an illusion. The world is wild, unpredictable, and darkness cannot tame it forever. Every act of cruelty, every decision made in service of selfish ambition, is a debt that must be paid. And debts, especially those forged in sin, come with interest. What the wicked never realize is that their triumphs are as fleeting as shadows, gone the moment the light of consequence shines. Evil's fatal flaw is that it eats itself. Betrayal is its language. Paranoia, its anthem. Those who serve it are forever suspicious, forever tearing at each other to get ahead, to survive. Alliances built on greed and fear cannot hold, because fear turns friends into enemies, and greed devours itself. What the powerful forget, what the wicked refuse to believe, is that their own nature will undo them. The knives they use to cut down rivals will one day find their own backs. The traps they set will one day spring beneath their own feet. It is not a question of if, but when. Evil is always on borrowed time. Power gained through cruelty may seem unstoppable, but it crumbles faster than the purest intentions. No throne built on the suffering of others lasts. The seeds of destruction are always planted the moment the first dark deed is committed. And evil has no patience, no foresight. It believes in its own strength, forgets that the world has a way of balancing itself. It believes that force can conquer all, that cunning can outmaneuver fate. But fate is not so easily fooled, and no amount of planning, no amount of cunning, can rewrite the laws of the universe. Evil exists to destroy, and in the end, it will consume itself, leaving nothing but echoes and ash. Even at the height of its power, evil is haunted by the ghosts of those wronged, by the sins that never quite go away. The mighty may sit on gilded thrones, may laugh in the face of justice, but deep down, they feel the whispers, the shiver of the inevitable. Paranoia sets in, the slow unraveling of their confidence. The weight of their actions presses down, and cracks begin to show. No empire built on cruelty is immune. The pressure mounts, the walls close in, and one day, one simple overlooked flaw will bring everything crashing down. The fall is always faster, always more brutal than the rise. It's almost poetic, the way evil destroys itself, like a serpent devouring its own tail, convinced that its hunger is power, not understanding that it's feasting on its own life. The masterminds, the tyrants, are trapped in a loop of self-deception. They never see the end coming, blinded by their own sense of invincibility. The sins that once seemed insignificant, the small betrayals that pave the way to victory, grow and fester until they can no longer be ignored. Evil doesn't just end, it implodes, spectacularly, with all the chaos and grandeur it once used to conquer. And those who thought themselves untouchable are swallowed, whole, forgotten, just another cautionary tale. Even nature rebels against evil. The very world seems to conspire against it, as if it cannot bear the weight of such corruption. The environment, the forces of chance and change, all play a role in eroding what the wicked have built. Storms come, empires drown, crops fail. The earth itself seems to reject the presence of those who act against it. It's as if the universe demands balance. demands that evil pay the price for upsetting the order. And when it comes, the fall is swift and merciless. No amount of power can stop it. No fortress can withstand it. The mighty are laid low, and the world keeps turning. Evil always contains the seeds of its own destruction, and those seeds never fail to sprout. It's a lesson older than time, one that tyrants never seem to learn. The sins committed in pursuit of power become the chains that drag the wicked into the abyss. What was once a tower of triumph becomes a grave of regret. Evil cannot sustain itself because it was never meant to. It thrives on ruin and decay, and so it inevitably decays itself. Even at the pinnacle of success, it is doomed, already rotting from the inside out. In the end, evil wrecks itself, vanishes, and leaves nothing but a warning to those who come after. And those who orchestrated the most intricate, grandiose plans only realize too late that the seeds of their downfall were planted by their own hands. They created their own downfall. Self-awareness, the double-edged sword of the human experience. It is our greatest blessing, the thing that sets us apart from the mindless forces of nature, from the unthinking masses of the animal kingdom. We are aware, painfully so, of our own existence, our choices, and the threads that tie us to consequence. But self-awareness comes with a curse, a flaw buried so deep in our bones that most never see it until it's too late. We have self-centered minds. We think we're the heroes of our own stories, the sun around which every other life revolves. It blinds us, drives us to madness, makes us greedy, needy, and ruthless. And that self-centered nature, it gets us into trouble, dragging us into pits we dug ourselves. The mind loves to imagine itself wise, enlightened, a beacon in the darkness. But pride and self-interest twist that light into something dangerous. We justify our actions, no matter how destructive, because the mind insists it knows best. Self-awareness gives us the power to reflect, to grow, to change, but we use it to construct castles of illusion, to convince ourselves that every desire, every selfish choice, is somehow righteous. We weave stories that paint us as victims or saviors, rarely villains, always above reproach. But the human mind is a master manipulator, and in its arrogance, it creates the very chaos it fears, digging a grave with delusions of grandeur. This error in our thinking, the blind spot of self-interest, leads us to ruin. We hurt others, chase dreams that turn to dust, cling to power or pleasure at the cost of everything else. The irony is that we often see the damage coming, can predict it, analyze it, understand it. But understanding doesn't always lead to change. We are prisoners of our desires, our ego, and the human mind will twist reality itself to satisfy those cravings. It whispers that we deserve more, that we are owed happiness, owed revenge, owed whatever our hearts desire. It convinces us to betray, to abandon, to destroy, even when we know the end will be ugly. Self-awareness should save us. It should be our guiding light, our way out of the darkness. But more often than not, it is the weight that pulls us under. It makes us overthink, overreach, overreact. The mind becomes a labyrinth, one that few can navigate without getting lost. Every action becomes a calculation, every moment a chance to twist reality to our favor. It's exhausting, a dance with shadows that never ends. And yet, we can't stop, because the mind is addicted to itself, to its own cleverness, to the idea that it can control everything, bend the world to its will. And that addiction, it is a slow poison. We are aware, yes, but awareness without wisdom is dangerous. We think, we plot, we plan, convinced we can outmaneuver fate, outsmart the universe. The human mind is a chess player that always underestimates its opponent, thinking a few moves ahead is enough to win. But life plays a deeper game, and while we are busy admiring our own brilliance, the board shifts, the rules change, and we find ourselves trapped. Every scheme, every selfish decision comes back to haunt us because the world does not cater to ego. It laughs at those who think they are invincible, who think self-awareness makes them gods rather than flawed creatures stumbling through the dark. And here's the tragedy. Our self-centered minds don't just destroy others. They destroy us from the inside out. We become paranoid, anxious, haunted by the ghosts of our own choices. We carry guilt, even if we bury it deep. And that guilt festers, infecting every thought, every dream. The human mind is a battlefield, and most of us lose the war against our own demons. We act as though we are invincible, as though we can handle any consequence. But in the end, our own awareness is a blade we keep turning against ourselves.